Hi everyone, welcome to our panel called Is There a Hidden Side to Remote Learning and Working? And we're gonna start by introducing each other. And I want to please learn about your name, your pronouns, your major, the country of origin, and also if you're part of ICSP. And I'm gonna start. My name is Claudia Hans and I will be today the facilitator. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm from Venezuela. What else? Oh, my major. And a finance and supply chain double major with some certificates as well. And I'm the coordinator of ICSP. And we're gonna do this popcorn style. I'm just gonna send it to somebody else. And even the audience can introduce themselves since we're just a few of us. So I'm gonna pass it to Michaela.
Thanks, Claudia. Hi, everybody. My name is Michela Sottura. I am from Italy. I've been in Portland for about 4 years. My major is English, and I'm also minoring in women's studies and creative writing. And I've been a member of ICSP for a little over a year. And I think that's it. I will pass it on to Charlene.
Hello, everyone. My name is Charlene Crystal Namuige, and I am from Uganda, which is in East Africa. I use pronouns she, her, hers. I am a computer science major in my 3rd year currently, and this is my first term as an ICSP member. I'll give it to Mizuki, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. My name is Mizuki. I'm from Japan, and my major is theater arts, and I go by they, them, theirs. And it's been 3.5 years since I came here, and this is my 2nd year as ICSP member. I'll pass it on to Suho.
Hi everyone, my name is Sono Kim. I'm from South Korea. I have been part of ICSP for about a year, and I'm double majoring in philosophy and economics, and I'm really happy to talk to you guys. Yeah, thank you. I will pass it on to Tapiwa.
Hello guys, my name is Tapiwa. I'm from Zimbabwe. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a GIS graduate certificate student and a hydrology graduate certificate student. This is my first time with ICSP. Yeah, I think that's about it. I'll pass it to Rachel.
Hey everyone, I'll just be running things behind the scenes today, but my name's Rachel Dietz. I'm an International Student Life Advisor and the advisor of the International Cultural Service Program, and I'm looking forward to this discussion today. I'll pass it to Maria.
Hi everyone, I am Claudia's sister and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm actually a student at Pacific University and my major is psychology. And I'll pass it to May.
Hi everybody, I'm Maria's and Claudia's friend. So I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a student at Pacific University. And I'm from Germany originally.
Cool, thank you everyone. And since we have a couple of new people, I just want to remind everyone again, we are not going to be unmuting ourselves unless being told to do so, because if you unmute yourself, you're going to be recorded and we don't want that. But there's going to be some open-ended questions where we want to get your insights. Also, if you have any follow-up question, feel free to comment it in the chat. We will read them out loud and keep the conversation. And yeah, so I want to start our conversation today, which is going to be very casual. We just want to hear about everyone's opinion. Of course, the panelists will be like the main speakers. But if you ever have anything to add, let us know like through the chat, and we can call you out and you can speak to us. So I want to start with the first question. I want to know, how has been all this remote learning and experience working online for you? And anyone from the panelists can answer this.
Hello again, my name is Charlene, and my experience with remote learning and working has been, I guess, very eventful. It's had its ups and downs. I appreciate being able to be in my comfort zone and not have to commute. But again, I understand the struggles of being close to your bed and procrastination just because you are home and have the ability to kind of laze off and not do the things you're supposed to do. I know these are my struggles at the moment, and also trying to keep all the things that you have to do in line. For some reason, I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but it feels like I have more work to do now than I had while we were going to school. And I don't know if it's actually more work, or I just feel like it's a lot more to do. So that's been my experience in a short, brief summary of remote learning.
Thank you, Chatlin. Yeah, I feel you 100%. I think it's just you need to do the same, but you need to work harder to remain focused. And I think a lot of us are feeling that way. Does anybody else want to share like their experience with remote learning and working?
Yeah, I can share. So I am both working from home and going to classes from home. And I feel like one of the hardest things has been to separate work time and school time from rest and relaxation time, because I feel like since all that I'm doing is at home in the same room, it's really hard for me to step away from work and step away from school and take some time for myself, because I'm constantly just being reminded of all the work that I need to do. And so I feel what Charlene was saying, in the sense that it almost feels like it's more work because you don't have, or at least I feel like I don't have that break from class and I don't have that break from work. But overall, I would say that it's been tough. It's definitely been tough, especially the beginning, to getting used to the online environment. But I do consider myself to be lucky, because so far I haven't had any issues with technology, and I have access to a computer and internet. So I do feel like I'm lucky just for that, and I'm lucky that I get to experience online learning and working.
Great. I totally feel you, and we will touch on more about that, like how lucky we are to be in the U.S. Because we do want to talk about the comparison. But before we move on to another question, I want to know: does anyone in the audience wants to share how has remote learning been from there? Um, we know like this is not a thing specifically for students or working. It's all over the world. So if you have any experience you want to share, please join.
Oh yeah, I want to share my experience on the remote learning, but I would say I want to share two experience. One is from PSU. I think remote learning is sometimes is struggling for me because I'm a personally a more visual person, and also I'm a more interacting person in a way. So I will really happy to have a interaction with people in person, but I can still interact people through Zoom, and I can see their eyes and their reaction. But still, there's some missing part inside of me, telling me like, oh, there's something missing. So that's my experience with the learning, Zoom learning experience. But also, I wanted to. It is good experience and also bad. Anyway, yeah, it's good experience. I have a event happening in South Korea, so I wanted to participate, which was impossible if they held in Korea, but they did through Zoom, so I could participate. But the time differences thing happened, so I need to wake up 3 a.m. in the morning and then listen to the lecture. But that was really good experience for me. It is positive aspect of Zoom meeting, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think those are one of the perks of being remote, is that basically the whole world is connected right now because we can basically be anywhere and everywhere. So it's really nice that you point that out. Cool. So now let's touch on more specific. And I want to learn more about how your countries are dealing with the whole being remote. How COVID affected your country and how did they manage to overcome those challenges?
Actually, I can go first too. So apparently, South Korea has been handling COVID virus really properly, and also nowadays the new cases about like 100 new cases, but still it is still threatening to people. So like the school open their school, but they close again, and it is repeatedly happening. So people feel like there is not really hasn't really come down to the ground so people can feel more comfortable being around and go to school. But nowadays there's some up and downs still exist in South Korea. So people are more uncertain about the situation in the future, in the near future, and even current situation as well.
Yeah, I actually found that very interesting. And I wanted to follow up another question since you were the first one to speak, Sunho. Um, I wanted to learn more about how South Korea is handling all the remote learning because, according to the World Bank, and we did do some research for this panel, by the way, to the audience. And if you are interested, we can share those sources with you at the end. We have a document where we have them all together. So, in the World Bank source, they claim that South Korea has an education broadcasting system called EBS, and it's sponsored by Korea Education and Research Information Services. And this offers free learning services. Can you tell us more about this? Do you know
Yeah.
anyone
Yeah.
that's making use of this? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a user of the EBS program. It is fully online, and it also is basically it used to be a TV channel, but it's still a TV channel, but they expand their um, how can I say program online as well. So they have their own program that record and posted on online. So it is free to everybody, and it is really helpful in terms of academic learning. So I'm here, but sometimes when I want to learn something relating to the topic that I'm studying right now, I look up and I can easily find some source from that. Yeah. EBS is really popular and everyone knows about it. It is basically educational channel.
And
Basically
what
it's
does it cover?
specialized.
What does it cover? Is it like every single topic
Yeah,
or?
pretty much. Yeah, pretty much every single academic field. Like mainly, so I usually find information in science about science and even education. My major is philosophy, so I looked up some philosophy videos, and there are some really good resources that I can learn from it. Yeah, it's such a great yeah, source.
That's amazing. Does anybody else want to share how their countries are dealing with COVID and the whole remote learning challenge?
Yeah, I can go. So I'm from Zimbabwe. So initially, when COVID was discovered in my country, they didn't believe it. They just thought it's a Western thing. So they were slow to react, and then borders were still open. But I think we're lucky in that few people came in with COVID, so it didn't affect that much. But numbers started growing, and then they closed workplaces and schools, and then when they close workplaces and schools, they also closed the transport system. So some people still went to work, but it was now hard to transit from work to home. So they cut out most of the public system and only left like the government-backed buses, which was a problem because there was overcrowding in those buses. But as of now, it doesn't show that that influenced the rates of corona, but it's still a risk, a big risk, and it's still happening. And then in the school system, I can say there were three tiers to the response. Like if you went to a private school, most of those private schools we had online, were early to set up online learning portals. Then their students could access like education through WhatsApp and through online, and they'll submit assignments. But those going to government schools, they couldn't do that because one, the teachers were on strike or go slow, and then most students didn't have the resources to attend classes online or to submit stuff online. And then I think the government, I think they have some radio programs for learning, of which I think some people were able to access, but still some people, especially in rural areas, couldn't access because there's no electricity over there. So that's a problem. And then in the city, in some cities, electricity is also a problem too. So that's another issue. And then with universities, so this is what happened. The government had said, had promised to give university students data, like through their universities, but that didn't happen. There was corruption in the process. And then, yeah, some students were expecting to get like data to do their online learning, but they couldn't do that. And then the other thing with them is not everybody can afford a laptop, and also other people come from rural areas too where there's no connectivity. So that didn't work out well. Because I also remember some of the stuff for my sister is graduating, or she just graduated today. I had to help her with some of her assignments. So from here, so I would yeah, fix her papers and then send it to her, and then she would personally email her professors. Yeah.
Thank you for that info, Tapiwa, and congratulations for your sister for like surviving and thriving even through these hard times. I actually, I I think my country is going through a really similar situation. So I'm originally from Venezuela, as I mentioned before, and we do have a political situation that makes the country very unstable. And we do have a lot of electricity shortcuts. Plus, our currency is not very strong, so a lot of people are living in poverty levels, and they do not have the resources to like acquire any kind of electronics to keep being online. And we actually have a strict lockdown. So everything is online. A lot of people are not working, are not going to school because they do not have the resources. And the government is basically just ignoring all this. And they don't even have official stats. They just kind of like come in like and share some stats, and they don't even have sources. So basically it's a joke show for them. So I totally feel you, Tapiwa. I think this was the main goal for this event. We want to know about what, like, how are other countries doing? Because we hear about the US, we hear about developed countries, but what about those that don't have resources, you know? And now that we are talking about Africa, since Tapiwa was commenting on it, I want to learn about Uganda as well. What do you have anything to share with us, Charlene?
Yeah, of course, I have some news to share. Uganda has been facing a very similar situation, like you said, Claudia and Tapiwa. For me, I wanted to really get down and listen to what my brother and my friends in Uganda say. I have friends in the university. A couple of them study in neighboring countries like Kenya, and a couple study abroad, like in Canada and other countries, and I have a couple in Uganda. My friends in Uganda said they were sent back home. They did have access to material online, but it didn't go on too long. So they kind of put a pause on everything. My brother in secondary, which would be the equivalent of high school, was sent back home during the early times, probably March. And in the beginning, they sent emails with kind of work to keep them busy and keep them occupied. But I think that also kind of just went down because as the pandemic, as it became clear that it was real and we had to stay home for even a longer time than we anticipated, became harder to kind of see what the plan was. So that's the education news on that side. But the general pandemic remote working situation has been, I feel like in the beginning, the government was kind of quick to realize that this is a situation we need to lock down and we need to kind of have everything set for the people of Uganda. So it was locked down pretty quickly, and then schools were closed, workplaces were closed, and they stopped the country really came to a pause. There was no public transport allowed, and it became quite difficult because there were no cars allowed to be on the road. And so it was actually quite funny in the beginning. The president would say, you don't need to, you can walk to where you're going. If you have to go anywhere, it doesn't need to be that far. If you're going to like buy food, there's probably a place close by that you can walk to, or like ride your bicycle on. So that's what the president said, and people just had to like let go of their cars for the moment, and they had for basically the people allowed to work were people working for the government. So each car allowed on the road had to have like a government sticker on the car for the police to allow the car to move. If it didn't, they'll check you, and then you'd probably end up going to jail. It was quite the situation. So they were very, very strict on transportation. But other than that, I know I did read an article about the same situation, like the online remote learning in Uganda, talking about services being provided on the radio or on TV, and I feel like it's like touch and go, because like Tapio said, it's very easy to say you have education being provided on the radios and TVs, but do people have radios and TVs is the question. Like, do they have access to the things that you're providing for them? Because in my case, my brother has access to a TV, he has access to a radio, but it's not, again, you need to realize it's not the same thing with having, you know, a face-to-face interaction with your actual teacher, right? You're following a syllabus when you're in school, and now you're out of school and they're just telling you this is what you're going to learn, yet you may not have any background information on that. Like, where's the connection between what they're teaching you on the radio and what you were learning in school? So there's a disconnect there. And we also have to keep in mind that Uganda has a lot of rural areas where people don't have access to the TVs, the radios, and electricity. So it's been quite a struggle for students in Uganda. I know one thing they did currently was we have candidate classes, which would be like the end of your high school here in the US. When you're moving on to university, it's a really big class, like you're a senior. In Uganda, we have candidate classes, which is you're moving from primary school to secondary school, or you're moving from your O levels in secondary school to A levels in secondary school, or you're moving from your secondary school to university. Those are the big classes where you have to do this big exam and pass your exam and get accepted into a new school. So for those classes, the government decided to let them back into school just to kind of get their papers done and like, you know, do their papers so that they can move on to the next class. But for the rest of the classes, it's kind of like they're going to have to retake their class as per now. So that's the situation with education in Uganda at the moment.
Yeah, thank you so much, Charlene. And you read my mind because I was actually going to ask you guys about that. I found an article by UNESCO that claims that in Africa, around 89% of the learners do not have access to computers and 82% lack internet access. So it totally goes with what you two were saying. I think it's very concerning, not just in Africa, as I was saying, even in Latin America, there's countries, and I bet that all over the world, there's countries that are struggling to keep up with online learning and working. Something else I found, and this is kind of like a comment for Tapiwa, I found that the World Bank says that the education sector response strategy in Zimbabwe by the Ministry of Education, they claim that they're encouraging people to use digital platforms. And this is kind of funny because you can encourage, it's kind of like what Charlene was saying, it's touch and go. They're just trying to fix the problem without actually tackling it. They're just like suggesting things. And I think that happens like all over the world. I know my country is actually doing those things. But I want to learn, what about the other side of the world? What about Japan, Mizuki?
Yeah, in Japan, like the government asked the schools for their closure on March, the beginning of March, and it was for every school, like elementary and junior high and high school, and it was continued till end of the May. But most of schools already reopened and students go to school right now. But the government and especially Ministry of Education announced the guidance for educator with which they can have a safe educational environment. And yeah, and although it was reopened right now, the number of new corona cases not reduced. Like since July 10th, it's been over 200 cases every day. So it might be the case like school closure happen again. And I found the one statistic of usage rate for personal computer in Japan in 2017. The share percentage of personal computer is 72%, but this statistics shows only per household, so it doesn't mean every student has access to their computer, and especially those who are from like not rich, kind of poor household, is more tend to not to have access to those. So yeah, the government has to work on those gaps, how to fill the gaps, and they're not doing well about it yet. Yeah.
Thank you, Mizuki. I think it's really interesting to see kind of like compare and contrast with how other parts of the world are doing. And I want to know now, what about Italy? I know Italy was one of the biggest coronavirus, what is the word, contagious? No, that's not the word. But Italy was one of the first ones that had like a very high content, a very high number of people with coronavirus. So I want to learn, like, Makila, can you share with us a little bit with that?
Yeah, of course. So kind of going through the timeline of COVID in Italy. So when things started getting really bad, so when we had the most cases was around February and March. And so that's when the government decided to put the country on lockdown. And so it was an enforced lockdown. There were like, it was regulated, and the police would be making sure that people were not leaving their houses unless it was for necessary reasons. And so for the first 2 weeks of lockdown, the schools actually closed completely. So there was no education for those 2 weeks. And then that gave the Ministry of Education time to figure out what the plan was going to be for remote learning, because that's what ended up happening for Italian students. So yeah, remote learning happened, and the government pretty much provided free access to the Google Suite, free access to Microsoft 365. So the government gave free access to tools that would enable that learning, but there was still like a lot of issues with accessibility, because especially the southern part of Italy that is a little bit more rural, in the southern part of Italy, it was estimated that around 2 million students didn't have a stable access to internet. And so that really showed how, even though the government did think about making sure that students were able to continue their education, there were barriers that prevented a lot of students and a lot of kids to get that access. And then as things started getting better after lockdown, the first education related thing that happened in person was the nationwide final exams for high school. So we have like a nationwide standardized exam for high school students. And so those happened in person, obviously maintaining the social distancing rules. But yeah, that was the first time that education kind of started being in person. And then over the summer, the cases went down, everything seemed fine, and school started back up in September, still maintaining the social distancing rules and having a mask in class. But in October, the country has seen a spike in cases. And so I think the latest news that I saw was that we had about 20,000 new cases of COVID in just the past week. So that that has forced the government to go back to the restricted measures. So now we're back on remote learning and distance learning, and there is almost a curfew. So places like public places close at like 10 p.m. because a lot of the reason why cases spiked so much was attributed to the nightlife. So people going to public places at night. But yeah, it's been really tough, and I feel like also part of like what's made it tough for me being an international student and being here was when things were really bad in Italy. Like just knowing that I was far from my family, and my family was, witnessing the country just having to experience this really horrible situation with so many deaths. And so part of like what made it hard for me to also be here was knowing that I was far from my family, and that my country was going through such a tough time. But yeah, I would say that overall the government has taken COVID pretty seriously, and has put measures in place to try and contain the cases, and things, are still changing. And even with education, things are still changing, because first it was online and then it went back to in person, and now it's back online. So it's an ever-changing situation. It's a really unstable situation that I feel like nobody really knows when it's going to go back to normal. So yeah, that's Italy.
Thank you so much for all that information. I think thank you for sharing also like your fears. I know that being an international student adds like a little extra weight on us, because we're like, most of us are apart from our families, and we have been having to face all this quarantine time, most likely on our own, or roommates, that people that you usually don't spend that much time with. So thank you all for sharing those experiences. I think it takes a lot to say them out loud. It's nice, like, to every once in a while say them out loud. But yeah, I wanted to know more about our audience, and Rachel is going to be sending out a poll, and I want to know if you know about anybody that lives in another country and they are facing issues with remote learning. And after the poll is done, if you want to share something with us, please feel free to do so. We would love to hear.
So I want to share just a brief story about my friend. Oh, she's way older than me, but yeah. So she teaches Korean in Jamaica, and Jamaica is really, really having a hard time to keep up with all the stuff happening, and the government couldn't really react properly, according to her. So she said the school she's part of was gonna open the school, and they back it up and try to open again, and they back it up. So she couldn't even make the class and manage the class properly. So she had to take up her work schedule for about a year. But right now they got back, but still they try to maintain the social distancing stuff. But their school system is not that great, I heard. So the social distancing thing puts really big um, obstacle for the students. Yeah, that's what I heard from her.
That's very interesting, Sunho. Thank you. I had never think about how Jamaica is doing. You know, like it's such a small island that usually you think about bigger countries first. But thank you. I think that's really interesting, and I had never heard somebody teaching Korean in Jamaica. So that's pretty cool. Does anyone else wants to share about any other country, what their experiences have been like?
Um,
Yeah.
I have a couple of friends from Uganda who were studying in China. I have a friend specifically who was studying in China, in Wuhan, when this whole pandemic started. And he was very, very open about sharing his experience online. He was sharing it to whoever could watch or listen. And I remember talking to one of my closest friends who was in China, but not Wuhan, and she said it was quite an experience for her because it was so hard being an international student in China in the pandemic. And I think because she was an international student, it made things even harder. And after I guess the worst happened in China, after it became better, they started treating international students, especially from African countries, in a not so nice way. They were like kind of getting them out of, after they had like checked their for their results, given them a corona test, they would kind of like get them out of their rooms, tell them you have to go check again, and kind of like put them in a quarantine, yet they had already been checked before having come back. And this is like in situations where they were in China, the whole corona situation happened, they went back to their own countries because I believe they felt safer there. Then they came back, and there was a conversation that international students from other countries were bringing it back to China. So that was the whole story that was going on there. And so there was a lot of um, harshness that was happening in that situation. So she shared, and she was like, on top of being stuck in your room, because I know we like to all say that we're in quarantine but we do have, in the US especially, we do have the liberty of like going outside for a walk, like, enjoying the fresh air. But for her, she had to be in her room. And I think they gave them a few minutes a day to be able to go outside, but it was hard to get groceries. It was just hard to do everything because the pandemic was so bad there. And it makes sense to an extent, but it's very interesting how we all have been through like different aspects of this, how we have suffered differently during this period. And well, after a while, she left China again and went back to Uganda. Now, at that time she went to Uganda, corona was not as bad, but then it started to pick up, and now she had to face the challenge of corona in Uganda. But she definitely says that the only real issue is her having to wake up at night and kind of study during the time because of the whole time difference. But she feels much more relaxed being at home because it's one thing having to suffer through the pandemic and then also just being stigmatized against during a pandemic. So she felt like it was just better for her to go back home. And yeah, that's a story from her perspective.
Yeah, Charlene, I think you brought up a really complicated point that like we have seen during these difficult times, and it's the fear and the ignorance. I think we see it a lot. Well, we saw it, and I hope we don't anymore, but I know that it's still going on. We saw a lot of racism towards Asian people, and I don't know if maybe Sonho or Mizuki experienced anything and they want to share, but I do know that I have friends that experience a lot of racism, and it was kind of like it was very like I felt very frustrated because obviously, I mean, even if Asian people had this disease, they have been in the US for years, like how are they gonna have this disease and like how that it doesn't make sense. And this is where you see racism kind of like flower up, like it's just all over the world, and it comes like in different shapes, and it doesn't matter your color. It's just the ignorance. People are ignorant, they're fearful, and that's their method of defense, which is justifiable, but it's not right. And like you can see where they come from, but it's not okay. So yeah, does any like did you ever have any experience like this in the US or anywhere, Sonho or Mizuki, that you want to share?
You want to share, Mizuki, or?
Actually, fortunately, I haven't faced any kind of discrimination or prejudice attitude towards me. Maybe because I didn't go out much, but yeah. So
Yeah,
how about you?
Yeah, I can share. I have experienced. So I was with my girlfriend waiting on the line to get the relief fund. So my girlfriend is a Nepali American, and there are a lot of people waiting on the line to get the relief fund. And this lady in front of me kept looking back at us and just like glancing us like a weird face. And she kept saying like social distancing to me. And I was like, okay, but around her, in front of her, was so close to her, and we were trying to step back a little bit. But it didn't make sense for me to, like social distancing among that in that situation. It was really crowded. It was a weird situation. But she kept looking at me and saying, social distance, please, hey, step back. And yeah, and one time, uh, she was like, "You don't speak English, huh?" And because I didn't say anything, so and she said that, and I was like, "Yeah, I fought back, and I was like, hey, look around you. How could you say that to me?" Yeah, like that. And then some people around me backed up me and saying something to her too. Yeah, it was really bad experience, but at the same time, yeah, it's happening. I realized.
Actually, I have one thing to share. There was several months ago. When I went to Trader Joe's and I waited on the line, and there was um, uh, so one person who is giving us a card or basket, and so at first the person didn't ask anything to me, and the person just threw the card into the store. It's yeah, and yeah, I felt uncomfortable, but I don't know it was intentional or anything. So yeah, but I didn't see the same person did same thing for other people, just for me. So that might be, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like for me, these things happening as of 2020, it just doesn't make sense, you know. And thank you so much. I know it's kind of hard to talk about these topics, but I'm kind of glad you shared because it brings more awareness. I think sometimes we see a lot of ignorance through this, and people are like, oh, yeah, but maybe they're old people, just like breathe and let it go. But it's also like affecting you, you know? So thank you for sharing us with us. Um, and now that we're talking about the US, I want to move about how do you think the US is handling the pandemic? I don't know if you know about this, but I bet that you have seen that every state has been handling differently. I want to know about your perspective on this. What do you think? Is that okay? Is it crazy for you? What do you think of it?
Yeah, I can go. For me, I've been in Portland, or I can say Oregon and Washington State, where I think they've implemented good measures like social distancing, like they closed bars, restaurants, and stuff. But now people can eat from outside, like outside seating, which I think it's a safer way. So I think in those areas they've tackled it well. But I've seen in areas also like Texas, some people they still went ahead and did public gatherings and stuff. And I've been seeing through the rallies now for some politicians, there's just been mixing and mingling, and then you're hearing of cases of COVID going up from those rallies. So I think in those areas it's bad, and I just think it depends on the areas or how the people think in those areas. So in some areas it's been good, in some areas it's been bad. That's what I think.
Yeah, Dapiwa, I agree. Actually, I had another question, like a follow-up. And do you think it is fair to say that the US has it all figured out? And you can like say your argument against or pro. I just want to hear your perspective. Yeah.
I can say, well, as long as the cases are going up, I can say we haven't figured it out. Well, some scientists can argue like it hasn't reached a threshold, but I think when they put some measures, cases went down, and when they relaxed, cases went up. So I think they haven't really figured it out, because I can compare with my country where they just put a blanket shutdown, and it was a bit strict. You wouldn't go out without a mask. You had to go out with a mask. Well, in my country they failed with public transport. Here, at least the public transport is better. But I feel like I feel like they could have put a blanket shutdown early on in the first 2 months. Maybe it couldn't have been as bad as it is now. But yeah, with the First Amendment, I guess, or freedom of association and speech. So yeah, I support that. Yeah, but yeah, it comes at a price.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else have any other perspective or opinion about this?
I think the government, to an extent, can only do so much. We have to kind of notice that it really depends on the people themselves. A lot of the, at least in Oregon, I think Oregon has been doing it pretty good. Like, in my opinion, I think we've been, trying to handle it as best as we can. A couple of other states have clubs open, bars open. It's just it's like there's no corona. It's actually quite amazing how it's like it's not there. And I don't know, like it's weird because when you shut down all these things, the people get angry and start saying, "Oh, we need the bars open. We need to be we need to be able to not wear our masks." But the measures are being put in place for your safety. So it's kind of weird to me how you wouldn't want to be safe just because you want to go out, and like I just don't understand that. But then again, like you can see it from the other way that a lot of people depend on human interaction, and so there's really two sides to it. But then again, you want to be safe for yourself and for your family and for other people as well, not to put other people in any danger. So I feel like Oregon specifically has handled it well. I know a couple of other states have not been handling it well. And I know it's also dependent on, the population of the states. A couple of states have a lot of people, so it's not surprising that they have a lot of cases going on, regardless of, practicing social distancing. It's just hard because there's lots of people. So yeah, that's my take on Corona here.
Thank you, Charlene. Now that I see that you both kind of like agree that Oregon is doing very well, I have a statement that might change your mind. I wonder, do you think it was okay? I don't know what word to use. I will say okay for the Oregon government to say at the beginning of October to start classes with the wildfires. And I found a statement in an article by the OPB saying that at the beginning of October, the Oregon Department of Education reported that 14 school districts were affected by the wildfires. And this is like burned down, had to evacuate, like it could be any of this sort. And another 10 to 20 additional districts were affected by the poor air quality in Oregon. This situation caused some families to send their children away across the states to family members living in other states and cities so that they could attend classes. Do you think this is fair? This is like, was there anything else they could have done, in your opinion? I know this is a little controversial, but I think we always need to see like both sides, the pros and cons of how the government is doing. Does anyone want to? Yeah.
I think in the case of the wildfires, they should have put like a pause or something for schools, because even like you don't know what people are going through. If my house burns down and I still have to attend classes, that doesn't seem fair. I know there's ways you could probably talk to your professor and say, "Oh yeah, I had this," but you shouldn't need to even have to go through all of that. It should just be, we're all going through a thing right now, and let's just pause, because everyone was dealing with um, the wildfires. It was either you were actively involved in like a fire situation, or the air quality was not treating you right, and you had headaches. I know I had headaches, and like my chest really hurt because it was really bad air quality. And is that the kind of um, position I want to be in when I'm attending class? I'm not at 100%. So I do recognize, I do feel like at that point, the government should have done better in like giving us kind of like a pause just to kind of figure out what we're doing.
Totally, yeah. Does anybody else want to add one more comment about this? If not, I'm gonna ask my next question. Okay, do you think it's fair to say that we are all having the same experience with remote learning? And if you don't, what is your counter argument?
Definitely not. And I just share about the story in Jamaica. It is certainly really different. So when I hear about story in South Korea is a really small country, and I was a pretty stable internet infrastructure. So the government tried to enforce all the uh, state to have their own way to provide certain sufficient internet connection to the citizens. So I think that's handling well, I guess. I think there's certain part of population that cannot access to internet internet for sure. But compared to the situation in Jamaica, it is like completely a different world, I guess, so to speak. It's really bad. That's all I can say. And also, I can't even imagine how I I would handle that situation if I were in Jamaica. Yeah, I think I can't even imagine that. So definitely the experiences that I'm experiencing right now in the US and people in the Korea experiencing and my friends experiencing in Jamaica are completely different.
Thank you, Sunho. Does anyone want to add or say, yes, we are all living the same situation? No?
No, especially like I'm not gonna say that we're all living in the same situation, because I think we're definitely not. And I think even within even just from our conversation, it showed that like even within the same countries, there are so many barriers and so many factors that go into the experience of, if we're talking online learning, we're talking working from home, and even just lockdown and having to stay at home. Like, we don't know the situation, the personal situation of people that maybe are living with their abusers, that maybe have to share one laptop with the whole family, that maybe have childcare duties. Like, I feel like there are so many factors that go into a person's experience of this that that have not been highlighted as much as maybe they should have.
Yeah, Michaela, you bring up a really interesting point, and I wish we had more time to go in more in depth about it. But I want to end our conversation today with an open question, and I want to hear from you. How do you think we can overcome the challenges of remote reality?
I think it's mostly up to the government at this moment. Here in the US, I know the government tried to give a stimulus early on, but that was a one-off thing. It was helpful for that month because I was working. I used to work, but I stopped working because of Corona. I worked at Campus Rec, so I didn't have money. I was happy about that. But since then, it's been hard. And then I can say I've heard in Canada they've been giving people like 2,000 a month to survive, right? So I think if government can do that, and then if governments can provide like PPE for schools which are open, that would be a good thing everywhere. Even in my country, we have students writing exams, and what I've been seeing in the news is that some schools they don't have proper PPE, and then also I think it also has to go on a personal level because some people are failing to observe like social distancing. Even if you look at the students, they go, they play with each other, they're not observing. So it's on all those levels where improvement can be seen. Okay.
Thank you, Tapiwa. I want maybe one more person to share their thoughts, and then we can take maybe like one question for the audience. And if you have more questions, you can follow up. We can follow up with you in our email. I just share in the chat, and I also share our sources, so we can answer your questions since we don't have enough time. But yeah, what does everyone, maybe one more person, think that we can do to overcome the challenges of remote reality?
Yeah, I want to share just briefly. I was kind of sad when I was just walking on the campus whenever I see people, they cover the mask, but the way of they doing it is a bit um how can I say strange, and also I feel like there's no. I wish people would have more cooperative um mindset with the people rather than like making distance between people. Like you care about others and you care about yourself too, so you cooperate people. But nowadays people just try to avoid people in a way. I think this kind of fundamental thing for me to see people as one of us, but it is missing nowadays. I feel like so. This is that's
Thank
what
you.
I thought. Yeah.
Thank you, Sandra, for that closing statement. I will actually owe you those Q&A questions. If you have anything else you want to ask, just send us an email. And thank you, everyone, for attending. It was really interesting to see all the points of view and how we all like are facing this situation. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.